You know, when we think of high intelligence, we usually picture a life of effortless success, right? Like having all the answers. But what if that's only half the story? The reality is, for a lot of people, a powerful mind comes with its own set of unique and often silent struggles. So that brings up a pretty big question.
I mean, at first glance, the answer seems like a no-brainer, doesn't it? Of course it is. You solve problems faster. You see things others don't. It's a clear advantage in life. But what if the reality is way, way more complicated than that?
And right here, this is the core of it all. On one side, you've got the assumption, this idea of an easy life. But on the other, you have the reality, a really complex inner world full of emotional and social challenges. This isn't just about feeling a little different. It's about literally perceiving a world, a whole web of connections and consequences that a lot of people just don't see. And well, that comes with a pretty unique kind of weight. So let's dive into the first, and maybe the most common struggle. This is the one that happens entirely inside your own head. What happens when your brain just won't stop? This just hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? While someone else might have a conversation and just move on, the highly intelligent mind, it hits rewind. It plays it back over and over, analyzing every single word, every tiny shift in tone, every possible outcome. It's like having a computer processor that's always running in the background, and it can be absolutely exhausting. So this constant overthinking isn't just some quirky personality trait. It's a real psychological pattern, and it's called analysis paralysis. And here's the crazy part. Having more brain power doesn't always lead to better or faster decisions. In fact, because your mind can see so many different paths, so many potential problems, it can actually do the opposite. It can leave you completely frozen, stuck by the sheer number of possibilities. And that internal monologue, that constant analysis, it often feels another huge challenge. Perfectionism. We're not just talking about high standards here. We're talking about standards that are often completely unrealistic. It creates this constant, crushing internal pressure to be perfect. This can even get to a point that psychologists call maladaptive perfectionism. Now, this isn't your healthy, everyday ambition. No, this is a rigid, black and white belief that if something isn't absolutely perfect, it's a total failure. There's no in between. And that kind of mindset is a fast track to burnout and just feeling like you're never good enough. That internal engine is also what drives you to question, well, everything. On one hand, that's what leads to amazing discoveries and innovation. But on the other hand, it can be really isolating. It can create this huge gap between you and people who are just more comfortable with the way things are, with simpler answers. And that feeling of isolation, it doesn't just stay in your head. It tends to bleed out into our social lives, which brings us to this really strange paradox of being in a lonely crowd. This is where a huge disconnect happens. You might be craving a conversation about, I don't know, philosophy or psychology, the why behind everything, but you find yourself in a world that mostly runs on small talk about the weather and weekend plans. It can leave you feeling so misunderstood, like you're alone even when you're in a room full of people.
And it isn't just about conversation. Because your brain is wired for complexity and needs new things to chew on, routine, repetitive tasks can feel almost physically painful. Seriously, it feels agonizingly dull. This isn't laziness. It's a genuine need for a level of mental engagement that everyday life doesn't always offer.
Ugh, and then there's the pressure from everyone else. People just expect you to be perfect, to know everything all the time. The second you make a mistake or don't have an answer, you might hear this exact phrase, or at least you can feel people thinking it. It is such a heavy burden to carry, this unspoken rule that you are never ever allowed to fail. That constant pressure from the outside world is basically the perfect breeding ground for something called imposter syndrome. It's that nagging voice in the back of your head, that persistent fear that you're going to get found out, that all your success is just dumb luck, and that you're not nearly as smart as everyone seems to think you are. This all leads us to our third big challenge, and it's a heavy one. It's the sheer weight of awareness that comes from seeing and feeling the world with so much more intensity. A highly intelligent mind is basically a pattern recognition machine. But here's the catch. You don't just see the good patterns. You also see the subtle manipulations in an argument, the dishonesty in someone's story, the hidden motives behind their actions. Being constantly tuned in to all the world's negativity, it can be incredibly draining. And that intensity gets turned way up because high cognitive intelligence is very often linked with high emotional intelligence and empathy.
Think about it. A brain that's amazing at seeing complex patterns and logic often uses that same power on social cues and emotions. So it's not just that you logically understand someone is in pain, it's that you have the capacity to really feel it, almost like it's happening to you.
So, how does this actually happen? How do you end up carrying someone else's emotional baggage? Well, it's kind of a three-step process. First, you see someone's pain. Then, your empathy kicks in and lets you understand it on a really deep level. But then comes the crucial third step. You unconsciously absorb that emotional weight, and you start carrying it around as if it's yours.
There's a name for this phenomenon. It's called emotional contagion. It's exactly what it sounds like. You catch the emotions of people around you. And it's the main reason why so many intelligent, empathetic people can feel so weighed down all the time. They're burdened by struggles that aren't even their own. Okay, so after going through all of these challenges, it would be so easy to look at high intelligence as a burden, maybe even a curse. But that's not the whole story. The key here is to reframe it. First things first, it is so important to validate the experience. Yes, seeing the world this way can absolutely feel lonely. It can be super confusing, and sometimes it can be genuinely painful. Your feelings are real, and they make total sense. And right here, this is the turning point. Because despite all of those very real difficulties, your mind, your unique way of seeing the world, is not a curse. It's something else entirely. It's a gift, but like any really powerful tool, you have to know how to handle it. It needs balance, so you don't get lost in your own thoughts or overwhelmed by your feelings. It needs you to set boundaries, to protect your own energy from all the noise out there. And maybe most importantly, it thrives when you find the right people, the ones who appreciate your depth instead of being intimidated by it.
So if you take just one thing away from all of this, please let it be this. You are not too much. You're not too sensitive or too intense. You just think deeper than most people do. And that is absolutely not something you should ever have to apologize for. So let's end with this question. If this way of thinking isn't some flaw that you need to fix, but a gift that you need to understand, then the real journey isn't about changing who you are. The real journey is about learning how to use the incredible mind you've been given.